attack the enemies there, and it was a filthy wet night, absolutely storming down, blowing across the estuary, and even the farmer, Willie Guest, said, I wouldn't have been like to be out there that night with a picture of the there's the railway crossing, there's the river, and there's the power station there, and they were all in a group here. There's like a big drainage ditch when the river floods up, it's tidal still, and they were there in a bunch, and he said it was horrendous, the conditions, absolutely horrendous.
I think that might have some bearing on the fact that the injuries to the sheep were not clinical. A lot of them had got crushed skulls from the top, but one of them, like that poor blighter there, top left, had got a cut right down from the top of its head to its nostril, and it was actually breathing through a hole in the top of its head. They had to shoot it 3 times to put it down.
Yeah, the dog, his dog had pulled it apart, but the farmer Willie Guest said it was a neat slot, about a 1/4 inch wide, something like that, from the top to the nose, like a slit. And they couldn't think what could have done that. Other perhaps a machete or something, but I mean they're quite long blades, and it was just.
Well, that one below it, I mean, you can see the injury there to the front of the skull there.
Yeah.
That injury is typical of the other sheep, although in that case the wool is cut away so you can see the injury, but in the others you could just sort of press the skull in with your thumb.
Soft.
And that, of course, is a very hard part of the sheep's skull. So it must have been a heck of a bang that's crushed it.
So you had 26, was it 28? And there were lots what we call the walking wounded.
Yeah.
There was one dead but no obvious injury, but the vet says they can get they're very prone to shock, sheep, and then they just drop on like heart attack. And then there was I went back to see him sometime later, about a year, 10 months later. I was passing him and dropped my daughter down at Cardiff, and he said the final death toll was about 45. So even a lot of the walking wounded hadn't survived.
Right.
So it was quite a big loss to them.
Absolutely.
But to imagine in those conditions in the dark, to have a huddling sheep up against the embankment with dogs, and then to use a firearm, shooting randomly, and there's jostling sheep around your legs.
Yeah, well, ludicrous, isn't
Would
it?
have been very dangerous for the people handling the weapon anyway.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
You ever tried to catch a sheep on its own in a field?
in
No
any case,
chance.
Jane, the vet, they know what dogs do. They often are called out to dog damage.
Yeah.
And she said this is not definitely 100% typical of dog damage, because they go for the back of the legs, the damage on the
That's
legs.
right. And they're chasing them,
They chase them. So they were absolutely confident, weren't they, Robert? It was not the dogs.
When I was dealing with those over on the east coast,
So you were saying you had a case in Farlingdales?
well, there was plenty up there where there were mutilations, because there's a big Dolby Forest up there, and they're having all sorts of mutilations. It was happening to cattle, deer, sheep, you name it, even things as small as rabbits and badgers. And but this one day I was on this farm up there, and they'd had several attacks on sheep, the strange attacks, that is, the strange things. And there was one there where the farmer's wife was actually treating a young lamb, and she was injecting it with antibiotics in there. And she said this had been in the same field as where others had been attacked, but it hadn't been killed. But it was very, very strange, because all the hair, the fur, the wool on its head had been singed right back down to its scalp. It was all one sort of hardened, congealed mess, where some intense heat had been on it, and made all the fur do what fur does when it gets sort of, if you was to set it alight, it all singes right back down. And they said right back down to its skull.
Goodness.
And she said she'd never seen anything like this in her life. She said heat, whatever it's called, it's got to be heat that's done that. And I don't know whether it lived eventually, but she was certainly doing her best to keep it alive. This young lamb. But they lost a lot of sheep up over around them Dolly forests, and but there were time and time again there were cases of deer being killed, and as I said before, badgers. There was several badgers. There was rabbits, all mutilated the same way. It was basically going right across the spectrum. of animals, wild animals and that, you know.
I think you showed us some photographs at the Centenary Hall, was it? Once of the deer with a hole in the head.
Yeah, that's right.
And the mice, I think.
The mice is a very interesting one because the Jason Andrews case, where they're having all the UFO interaction there, they found all these mice lined up dead, and once again lined up neatly next to each other. Now we've got independent people, totally separate, divided by half the country, and they're coming up with exactly the same things. Now, those mice that were found on Jason Andrews' farm were absolutely identical to some mice that were found on the front lawn of a house up in Barnoldswick, where they have been getting alien interaction. Same sort of thing, been watching UFOs outside the house and everything else. The wife went out in the morning and saw all these dead mice lined up on the lawn. Apparently also, in that area up there, they were saying that at the local church, the one overnight, all these pigeons were found dead. They must have roosted in the church, I don't know. Anyway, they found dozens of these pigeons dead in the morning in the church grounds.
Do you know what sort of injuries the pigeons had?
I don't know, because the people who were telling me didn't know. They just said they were found dead, you know.
Pigeon pictures, some somewhere from Southampton. And apparently had a neat hole, you know, in its back.
Oh yeah.
And a pigeon fancy, they took him to a pigeon expert, and he said he'd never seen anything like that before, and all the insides have been cleaned out.
Right.
So he said you would expect a predator, to go through the throat, take the head off, and go into the soft underbelly, not go through all the thick feathers in its back.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But you had a case, didn't you, Dave, recently?
With the owls?
With the owls,
lined up, yes. I didn't see that he'd long disposed of them, but the farmer again had seen the advert in the Farmer's Guardian, and he rang me up, and he was mystified because there was about 3 species of owl, and he found them in the field. It was early in the year, like February time.
Yes.
And they were in a dead straight line, I think he said facing north to south. And they were about 6 feet apart, spaced, all facing the same way. One had been literally cut in half. It had been dissected right down from the back of its head to its tail, so half was missing. So it was like a machine had taken a half off. And one had, sometimes I remember, one was decapitated. I can't honestly remember all the other injuries, but he thought this was most peculiar, not typical of any predator. I mean, owls are not easily predated upon.
That's right, yeah.
So
But you see, that's what the SAS men were saying there, that whenever they found human bodies, they were always, not just once, but always lined up right next to them, the gap between them identical all the time. So, I mean, I don't know.
Very neat, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
How about, you mentioned Dolby Forest. I'm sure you've said to me there was a particular field there where 7 humans have been found, totally devoid of all hair.
Yeah.
The hair, arms and everything, not just head and pubic hair.
That's right, everything. They were totally bald,
And they put this story out so that someone had been dumping
the bodies.
Mannequins.
Dummies.
Mannequins.
Yeah, in the field. That's what the locals were told.
Well, do you know, were they all laid out in rows, or were they, or was it?
Well, they
separate
weren't all found at the
occasions?
same time.
Oh, all right,
you know.
separate occasions.
I think there was one found by a couple. In fact, there was 2 in the field found by a walker who was a hitchhiker, who had a pack on his back, and going through the fields. And then on a separate occasion, there was one. For some reason or other, this field seemed to be the place of putting these bodies down, because they weren't taken from this field. These were coming from elsewhere in the country, some of these, and suddenly appearing dead in the field like this. So they were coming from elsewhere, they were being brought from elsewhere, wherever it was. And
you mean the person resided in the south of the country?
Different parts of the country, yeah.
And were found in Yorkshire?
In that field.
In that same field?
Yes, and so they found 7 over a period of time there. And in fact, the undertaker for the area were actually bound by the Official Secrets Act, would you believe? Because I chased it up, if you remember. In fact, my contact in